The global EV market is just this brutal war of attrition, right? And in the middle of it all, one company has just hit a milestone that seemed almost impossible for a value brand. They've actually achieved full year profitability. But how they did it, well, that reveals this fascinating paradox of extreme efficiency and maybe extreme risk. So how do they pull it off? And is it even sustainable? That's the puzzle of Leapmotor we're going to unpack today. It all really starts with this one number from their 2025 financial projections. After selling nearly 600,000 cars, Leapmotor is on track to make a profit of just 905 yuan on each vehicle. That's about 125 US dollars. I mean, that is an astonishingly thin slice of profit, and it really sets the stage for this entire story. And right here is where you see that paradox in action. On one side, you've got this explosive triple-digit revenue growth. I mean, they are selling cars like crazy. But on the other side, a net profit margin of less than 1%. This is a company running at absolute full speed, but living right on the very edge of profitability. So what are we really looking at here? Is Leapmotor a case of pure operational genius, just wringing out costs where nobody else can? Or is this a super fragile company that's caught in a commodity trap, maybe one small market shift away from total disaster? Let's dig into the bull case first. Okay, so the argument for Leapmotor really begins with how they build their cars. See, they don't think of themselves as just another tech company. They operate under what analysts are calling the industrial product thesis. Their competitive advantage, their whole moat, is built right on the factory floor. And their strategy here is, well, it's pretty radical. A massive 65% of their vehicle components, by cost, are developed and made in-house. And we're not just talking about the obvious stuff, like batteries and motors. No. We're talking about everything, from thermal management systems and power electronics, all the way down to the seats and the bumpers. The official term for this, as you probably know, is vertical integration. It's a strategy where you own as much of your supply chain as you possibly can. And while a lot of EV startups are actually moving away from this super capital-intensive model, Leapmotor is just doubling down on it. And this is what really sets them apart. While competitors often act as system integrators, basically assembling a bunch of high-quality parts from different suppliers, Leapmotor acts like a true industrial manufacturer. By making their own parts, they completely eliminate that 15% or so profit margin that would normally go to a supplier, and that creates this incredible structural cost advantage of about 10% over their peers. And you can see the results of this strategy directly in their engineering. Their Leap 3.5 architecture is just designed for extreme efficiency. By creating one central controller, they slash the number of electronic control units needed. By making 88% of their components common across different car platforms, they absolutely crush the cost of developing new models. This is what vertical integration looks like in action. Okay, so that's pillar number one. Now for the second part of the bull case, and this is how they build on that foundation, their global expansion. Now, traditionally, going global costs billions in new factories and showrooms. But Leapmotor, well, they found a different, much more capital-efficient way to do it. They call it the reverse overseas expansion strategy, and honestly, it's incredibly clever. Instead of building everything from scratch, they partnered up with the global auto giant Stellantis. So instantly, they gained access to a massive sales network and, crucially, a manufacturing footprint right inside their target markets. And we're not talking about some paper partnerships here. Stellantis put in 1.5 billion euros for a major stake. Back in China, the state-owned auto giant FAW Group invested nearly 4 billion RMB. This gives Leapmotor not just a huge war chest of cash, but the actual infrastructure to scale globally at a fraction of what it would normally cost. And this partnership creates what you could call a tariff shield. With all the rising trade tensions and potential EV tariffs in Europe, this move is a masterstroke. By assembling cars in Stellantis' plants in Poland or Spain, Leapmotor's vehicles become local products, which means they can effectively sidestep the import duties that could completely cripple their cost advantage. But the clever financial engineering doesn't even stop there. If you look at Leapmotor's 2025 balance sheet projections, you'll see this massive number, 40.8 billion yuan. That's over $5.5 billion in trade payables. This is money that they owe to their suppliers. So what this does is it creates a situation called negative working capital. Because their sales are growing so fast, they collect cash from customers way more quickly than they have to pay their suppliers. In effect, their suppliers are providing them with a massive interest-free loan. This is the high wire act that makes those razor-thin margins possible. It's incredibly powerful, but it only works as long as you're growing at hyperspeed. So that's the bull case, a vertically integrated cost leader with this brilliant asset-light global strategy. Sounds pretty good, right? But now it's time to play devil's advocate. Let's really stress test this thesis and look at the bear case, the cracks in Leapmotor's armor. And the bear case starts right here, with the price. Leapmotor's average car is projected to sell for just over 100,000 RMB. Now, compare that to premium rivals like Neo and Li Auto, who command more than double that price. Leapmotor's entire brand is built on value, which makes it really, really hard to build any kind of brand premium. And that leads us directly back to our very first point. As this analyst's quote sums up perfectly, yeah, the discipline is impressive, but that margin is incredibly fragile. A small spike in lithium prices, maybe a rise in shipping costs, anything like that could instantly wipe out that 905 yuan profit and push the whole company right back into the red.
Now, you might be thinking, so what if the margins are thin? Look at this cash pile. And you'd be right. Leapmotor is projected to end 2025 with nearly 38 billion yuan. That's over $5 billion in cash. That is a formidable war chest that should provide a massive safety buffer, which makes what's on this next slide all the more puzzling.
So get this, despite sitting on billions in cash, the company was publicly listed as a dishonest debtor in 2025 over what was a relatively minor dispute. For institutional investors, this is a huge red flag. It raises all sorts of questions about their corporate governance and operational maturity. I mean, is the company's internal machinery really ready for the global stage? So how do we weigh these two totally competing narratives? The Chinese EV market is entering what a lot of analysts are calling a survival mode. It's a brutal war of attrition where dozens of companies are expected to fail. And this is going to be Leapmotor's ultimate test. We can pretty much break down the future into a few key scenarios. In the bull case, they leverage those partnerships to become a global powerhouse with healthy margins. The most likely scenario, the base case, sees them as an efficient survivor, navigating the price war while their export business keeps growing. But then there's the bear case, where a surge in costs turns that value brand perception into a trap. And that remains a very real possibility. And so we're left with this question. Is Leapmotor a true industrial giant, secretly using vertical integration and strategic arbitrage to win the long game? Or is it a house of cards, built on razor-thin margins and completely dependent on hyper-growth that just can't last forever? The answer to that question is going to define a pretty key chapter in the future of the entire global auto industry.